Thank you for coming today. Happy Mother's Day. Welcome to the Hudson River Museum. I'm excited to be here. Thank you again for coming out. So before we start, where's everybody at in their sort of journey into miniatures? Raise your hand. You had a dollhouse growing up? Okay. How many of you have actually been here and have seen Nybylwyck Hall before? Okay, how about you? All right. So how many of you want to get into it? Are new to miniatures? Okay, good. All right. So that makes my job exactly what my job is really to inspire you to see miniatures the way I see them. To see them as precious little objects, and they can be dollhouse and playthings and children's things, and we love that. It's a great place, and that's a great way that folks get into the miniatures world. But it also is fine art, and plays in that category of fine art, in that it talks to you, it speaks to you, it's beautifully made, it's beautifully crafted, and really why we're here today is how storytelling is incorporated into the miniatures world to just raise that level of impact that much further, to make it more amazing, to make it great. That's not to say a beautiful miniature chair can't be beautiful or fabulous as it is, but when there's a story attached to it, who's sitting in that chair? Why is that person sitting in that chair? It just elevates that tiny little chair to a different place. So we're going to talk a little bit about Marco Banks, the creator of this beautiful structure. We're going to talk about his inspiration, the storytelling behind this masterful mini mansion that he created along with his mother, by the way, who both sort of contributed to this. So we're going to talk about him, we're going to talk about storytelling, we're going to talk about miniatures, obviously, and we're going to talk about the story behind Nybylwyck Hall and Nybylwyck family that Marco Banks created to help inspire and draw you into this beautiful structure. It's almost like the story is the icing on the cake of that beautiful chair. And so Mark was really, really great in that not only did he build this beautiful structure, but he brought into life all these characters of the Nybylwyck family, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, inspired by the folks around him, his family, his friends. A lot of the characters that you're going to hear that I talk about, that he created for this house, are based on people that he knew, his friends, his families, based on quirks they had, based on the stories that were happening around him at the time that he was building this structure, which, by the way, took him 10 years to create. So let me go a little bit back. Kristen talked a little bit about my background. Yes, for the most part, I sell miniatures, mostly through estate sales, reselling, collections. But what I love to do is talk about miniatures and promote miniatures and try to inspire folks to see miniatures, as I mentioned, the way I see them. And I would argue that the main job is really to show people these fabulous things, put it in front of them, have them see it in a different way. Perhaps maybe when they're growing up, they see it one way, when they're adults, they see it another way, and see it in a different way so that they can inspire them to get involved in miniatures, whether as a collector, as a hobbyist, a maker, an artist, or an everyday enthusiast. But go out and look for miniatures being put on display at museums and libraries and things like that. So really a lot of my focus is around selling, but what I love to do is promote and inspire. As Christian said, I have a YouTube channel that I promote miniatures on, this Meet the Miniatures series. I also have a mini-versity course that I offer. I have folks come in and talk about how to make miniatures, talk about principles of miniature making. I have folks come in and lecture about miniatures. So again, promoting miniatures, but definitely finding ways to engage people so they become interested in miniatures. So that's a little bit about me. I've always loved miniatures. A little more about me, sorry. I have always loved miniatures from a very, very young age. As long as I can remember. I think about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I think that was probably my earliest inspiration. You remember when the little trolley would go behind us to make it land of make-believe? It wasn't the little trolley. It was Mr. Rogers in his kitchen, and all these little miniature models made of all of the in the land of make-believe. And every time he would go to make-believe land, he would first meet in the kitchen and he would take those structures off of the shelves. Anybody remember this or something? And it would be the little tree house, and it would be the little castle, and he would pull those models down and I want that. And that, I think, was my earliest inspiration for the tiny but I was very encouraged at a young age. I did have a dollhouse at 7 years old. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, it was not the thing to do or have, but I had very supportive parents who were definitely helping me whatever I wanted to do, be, and engage in. And so, but life happened. I went to school, I had a career in consumer product marketing, and landed on my happy place, which, as I mentioned, was really selling and promoting miniatures. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about, obviously, we're talking about this awesome structure and the stories behind it, and the impact that storytelling makes to bring things like this to life. There's a real good reason why this piece is here in this museum today. And I'm going to go through those things that make something like this a fine art piece versus an everyday dollhouse. And it's not to say that we don't love dollhouses, but there are things that make this dollhouse a fine art piece that you would find in the museum. And so, I want to point those things out as we go through each of the rooms. We talk about each of the characters that are part of the story of the Van Nybylwyck family that Mark had created to help bring his structure to life. And as I mentioned, this was a collaboration with his mother, and his friends, and his family. For the most part, Mark was a builder. He had building in his family, so he also had it in his blood. But he was also an actor, so he had that also piece to him that helped to bring this to life and help feed, his almost an obsession, if you will. It took him 10 years to build this. He was living in New York at one point, and he moved to Washington, D.C. to go to school, to take classes. I forget what he wanted to study. I want to say hotel management. It was something like that. And so he had a studio apartment in Washington, D.C., but he had this love of miniatures, and he built this piece in the studio apartment on the floor in Washington, D.C. And it took him 10 years. But why don't we take a little bit of a step back so that we can ground ourselves in how we got here today with miniatures. Miniatures have been around for a very long time. The ancient pharaohs were actually buried with the treasures that they had built in miniature, because they couldn't take it all with them. So they basically miniaturized them. Their boats, the boats with the slaves, their household items. And so the ancient pharaohs, you can actually find these pieces in museums where they found them from the what do you call them? Come on. Thank you! So they've been around for a long time, for sure. And I think they've been part of human nature to like little things or want little things. In fact, they found in the Middle East, thousands of years later, tiny pieces, like tiny animals, not necessarily toys per se. They still don't know why, but we find throughout history examples of tiny miniatures, treasures, if you will. I would call them treasures. But it really wasn't until the Renaissance era. Let's fast forward to the 1600s. Think Amsterdam, Europe, canal houses. Think at a time when a middle class kind of was emerging, or actually upper class was kind of emerging. And so you would find in the 1600s and the 1700s examples of what we call today a dollhouse, but they didn't call them dollhouses. They were cabinet houses. They were literally beautiful cabinets that were handcrafted for women of a certain social class and status. And they were meant, and they were filled with tiny objects, mostly replicas of full-size objects in their houses. At that time, women didn't really own anything. So the only thing they really could do is they would hire artists on commission to reproduce some of their objects in their home in miniature. They would show them that it would be their opportunity to display their treasures, if you will. And so they weren't really playthings per se. They were meant to show off your wealth, to some extent to educate children at the time how a household is run. But for the most part, these were treasured objects not to be played with. So you'll find some of these examples of these cabinet houses in museums around the world. They're very, very rare, especially ones that are in great condition and fully original, because you can imagine as years go on, especially the ones that are in the same families for so long, people tend to pick at it, you might put something new in it, but so it's very rare. There are some that you find around the world. The Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam is a good example where you will find pristine dollhouses from the 1600s. And just a beautiful condition. Anyway, so that's kind of the earliest examples of dollhouse, if you will, that we know of today. Fast forward a little bit to, let's say, the early 1900s. Queen Mary commissioned a dollhouse made for herself, mostly as a way to, get people a little bit more happy. It was a really, really troubling time after World War I, so it's kind of a way to give back to the community. I mean, don't get me wrong, she loved collecting, and this was one of her pet projects too, but it was a community-based, for sure, dollhouse in London. And it's probably one of the beautiful examples of intact houses with everything that has not been touched in the early 1900s. So early 1900s, you'd start to see dollhouses, more, not necessarily cabinet house, but dollhouse. There's another couple of examples of dorm rooms in Chicago. I don't know how many of you have seen the dorm rooms. It's beautiful examples of beautiful miniatures. And so, again, not necessarily playthings yet. You can kind of get the sense that these are, people who have a lot of money to spend. Mostly everything was handcrafted at that point. So then you fast forward a little bit more to the manufacturing era in the 1950s, you start to see what we see today. The dollhouse kit, the Victorian house from the 1950s and 60s, the tin house. How many of you can remember the tin houses that were painted on? You see them in some garages. And they're pretty marketable if you can get one in really, really good condition. So then we start to see the dollhouse becoming more commercial in nature. But while that was happening, we started to see an emergence of fine art miniatures start to emerge for, I don't want to say masses, but it was still very, very niche. But artists started to make some of the objects you see in Nybylwyck Hall. Beautiful cabinetry, beautiful tables, beautiful pottery, and fine art paintings. And it's through like the 70s to the 90s almost, I call that the golden era, where there were a lot of makers making, and people were buying, there were a lot of collections in the market, and beautiful things started to be made for a wider group of people. And like I said, that's the golden era, but and it's kind of around the internet, 90s, you start to see that sort of die away. Because a lot of those folks who were making, and sellers who were selling, they didn't necessarily move on to modern times, the internet. The mom and pop started slowly to close up. And I call it like the dark period through like the early 2000s. But then social media, right? And you saw this emergence of people getting excited about miniatures all over again. Makers started making again. People started to get engaged. And 10 years later, you see where we are now, which is just this explosion of interest. If you go on YouTube now, you can see hundreds of thousands of views for some of these how-to videos or these videos that just showcase miniatures. So there is a lot of energy right now around the world of tiny. And so it's almost like a mini science, okay? where there's just so much happening in the mini world. And I think Marco Banks was sort of in the middle of all of that. So like I said, it took him about 10 years to make this piece, through 1990 to 2000, I believe, is how long it took him before he finished the house. The house itself, so he was brought up here in Hudson River Valley, very much inspired by the buildings, the architecture around him up here where we all are. And that is reflected in this house. And maybe afterwards you guys can scoot to the front, because that's really where it's mostly evident that there are actually 3 different styles of architecture. And that's the first thing that blew me away when I saw this, is that there are actually 3 distinct dollhouse, architectural styling here. There is the federal style, there's the Dutch style, and there's the Victorian style. And really, like I said, most of you can see that out in front. And it's really, really evident. But the fine artistry is how we work those three pieces together to what you see here in this beautiful, massive structure. So 10 years, like I said, took him to make this combination of work between his mother. He made a lot of apartments, and he purchased a lot of pieces. There was a really famous well-known or popular, dollhouse miniature shop. Dollhouse miniature shop in the Washington D.C. area, and a lot of these pieces came from that location. There's the Washington D.C. National Museum dollhouse shop, something like that. Don't know, but it's very popular, very well known at the time for having really, really good, solid pieces that he purchased from. But he also made a lot of pieces that you see in here. Washington Museum. Yeah. So, like I said, 3 different distinct architectural styles all brought together to just work perfectly in the design. And a really eclectic mix of what I said, really, really high-end fine art pieces that he bought in the Washington, D.C. area. He found a lot of the objects that you will see here. As I take you through the rooms, you'll see what I mean. And then mostly his contribution was building. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of work just to build the structure and then put it all together. Those are probably his 2 biggest contributions to it. And then, of course, like his brother gave me a few of the rugs, etc. But just the way those pieces come together is really extraordinary. Like you get this eclectic mix of beautiful, beautiful pieces. So the house itself was donated in 2004 by Mark's partner. So we did lose Mark early in the 2000s. I want to say 2001. But his partner, Patrick Layton, donated the house to his museum. We thank him for that. It's an awesome piece. I'm going to reference in a little bit, so don't forget that I mentioned Patrick. And I'm going to take you through why there is an eclectic mix as I go through each of the rooms, of why it's eclectic. I'll take you through that in a little bit. So, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's Dutch, Georgian, and Victorian style. I did say that. So those are the 3. Just a little bit of the stats. It's 8 foot long, 2 feet deep, 5 feet high, all the way up to the top of the chimney there. The name of the structure and the family, Van Nybylwyck, were the home was named after market consultant agent. So it's kind of cool. And I think one of my favorite things about the house architecturally, and I might try to point this out, and by the way, if you have any questions, like anytime, we're a pretty small group, just let me know that. Because I know I will forget sometimes I have a question, I'll lose it, so don't be afraid to go. Anyway, so there's so many of my favorites. But one of my favorite things about this house is that it is architecturally accurate in the sense that all of the stairways and the doors and the floors, they are joined in some way. If you start here on the lower level on the right-hand side, you can end up here realistically, if you were to scale down to doll size, you could get there. And a lot of that is not even, you can't even see it, which is another really great thing about miniatures. And what makes miniatures really, really great is the stuff that you don't know, but it's there. And to the artist who made it, the artist who made it isn't an artist. But it's there, and I get it. It's important that it's there. So there are places that in this dollhouse that are totally hidden, or at least very, very hard to see. And I think that's one of the things that makes this just amazing. There are over 900 individual objects strewn about throughout the house. And it's, like I said, a mix of high-end artisan fine art pieces, handcrafted by artists at the time. Some of them around today, even still making, and some of them we might have lost along the way. But definitely artists of that golden era that I mentioned. Because he was purchasing through the 90s, and a lot of the artists were getting their starts in the 70s and 80s. Does that make sense? So he was buying from really, really great artists of the time. Like I said, some of them are still around. Yes?
Did he look like for the entire design, or did he emerge?
I don't think he had blueprints per se, but he definitely had to have a plan. He had to have a plan. But from what I understand, there are no specific blueprints. He didn't draw this whole thing out before he started. And honestly, there is a little bit of a mishmash to it, which I have to appreciate so much. But overall, he had to have a very, very specific plan in mind before he started. Just because in miniature making, especially structure, you need to do something before other things, like a real house. He had to know certain things for one part before even tackling another part. And the entire house is electrified, so that adds a whole other element to the challenge, his challenge of putting this house together on the floor of the studio apartment in Washington. Yeah.
Well, and each room is individually electrified.
So the entire house is electrified. There are lights in every room. Like all lighting with miniatures, there are challenges. So not every light actually works to this day. Despite so many great efforts to get it done, it's very difficult. But the lighting you see here is under these LED lights that you see strips, all brand new to the house that they created for this specific exhibit where you see the dollhouse today in this gallery. And I did mention that for many years, this dollhouse was located in the mansion, in the Victorian mansion that's on this campus of this museum. And it was beautifully presented in this beautiful room. It had its own game. And it was the perfect place for it. But they brought it out over the last few months to become part of this exhibition of Perfect Pairing, which is a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity to bring it back, bring it out into a new location, to light it up, to see it in a new way. And I was thrilled when I heard that. So it may or may not, I'm not sure what the plans are. If it's gonna go back into the mansion, which kind of makes the most sense, but I'm happy it's here right now. Especially the way they lit it up and put it under the framing that it is right now in a fine art exhibition. So very, very excited at what they do. So let's talk about the Nybylwyck family that occupies this home, this structure. And I mentioned, a lot of these the Van Nybylwicks were inspired by Mark's friends and family around him. The names are also inspired by his friends and family. But this essentially, right now, this dollhouse captures one day in the life of the Van Nybylwyck family around the turn of the century, Victorian era, when a lot of family members all lived in one house, lots of domestic help. And so this is a snapshot in that one day of the Van Nybylwyck family when the youngest daughter, Celestine, is about to get engaged and marry her man, the man she maybe loves. We don't know because there's drama there. I'll take you through. But Celestine and Roderick are engaged. We're going to be engaged with this celebration. And the day revolves around all of that drama that's happening. So as I take you through each of the rooms, I will talk about some of those characters and the stories behind it. So this is around the turn of the century, maybe late 1800s, early 1900s, Victorian era. And don't forget, the Victorians believed in magic and fairies. So you're going to see there's a lot of representation of that, the magic and occult and fairies. There are fairies strewn about all over this mansion. And you can probably spend days with it, and then you will find even more. So, so spend time with this dollhouse because you'll see more and more revealed the more you look at it. Okay, so day in the life, Celestine and Roderick. Marco Banks also liked to name each of his rooms and also give a little bit of just life to each room, because it is a home to this large family, and each room sort of means something. And like any house, it starts with your center hall. And what I love about this house is that it's got this really grand center hall with a double wide staircase, and the second story, which you can see. Again, back to architecturally, I mean, the way he split this, he could have just done this and called it a day. But he spent time thinking this through and making this, a full floor and a half to create that drama around that double wide staircase. And what's also magical about this center hall, where it comes through the front door and then up those stairs, I mean, just for him to visualize and create that, bravo. Because there's a lot going on to do all of that way. But essentially, obviously, the front door, come in, come up the stairs, and go up. But underneath the staircase is where a lot of the magic is happening, because there are little gnomes living under the staircase. It's Patty Lady is the name of the little gnome who lives under the stairs, named after Patrick Lane, Mark's partner at the time. And Patty Lane is responsible for watching over all of the people who live in the home and take care of them and watch them. So Patty Lane lives under the house, and if you come afterwards, you have to come and look. Like I said, there are fairies everywhere. I'm going to point one out to you, so you can catch the one. There's one on the banister, on the banister. I mean, like I said, you can continue to see more, but there's one up there. So that is the lower great hall and the understairs. But let's go all the way. Let's start here and go through maybe each of the rooms. So, like any beautiful home at that time, there was a conservatory, usually right off of the kitchen, where you would grow your vegetables, grow some herbs. Obviously, this is the Rixley Conservatory. I believe this literally was also repurposed. I don't know from what, I forget what I read, but like I said, Mark would draw from scrap materials, he would find stuff, and I believe this whole metal structure was found. I don't know what it was, maybe Trillium, I forget. But it's perfect. I mean, it's just a perfect metal, perfect for the time around the Victorian era, when everything was made of sort of that heavy metal industrial look. It's got a beautiful tile floor and lovely, like, sort of wood elements. In the kitchen, Mrs. Griggs is the name of the woman who is the housekeeper, taking care of everyone in the home. She's preparing a meal for the guests that are about to come to Celestine's engagement party. There are a couple of well-known artist pieces in this room. William Klinger is a very famous woodworker. He's no longer with us, and he made the chairs and the table. And if you do a deep dive and look really, really closely, the handmade turned spindles on the chairs are just perfect. The scaling is perfect. The hardwood and the grains are perfect. They're really, really beautiful pieces. There's beautiful stoneware by an artist named David Graber, who's working today. She's an amazing artist. Mark called this the stomach of the house. And it's really representative of the time that, there's always someone in the kitchen making food. And then the next room is the golden dining room, and this is where the table is being set for dinner, and people are going to come for the engagement party. A couple of really beautiful things that are standouts in here. There's is a really amazing maker. He's with us today doing amazing work to this day, Peter Quisto. Beautiful silversmith in miniature. So some of the beautiful pieces there. There's a gorgeous Bepergine, I think I'm saying that right, with hand-cut crystal, which is the centerpiece on the table. This one is amazing. There's a silver candelabra hanging from the ceiling. There are other beautiful silver pieces. There's a couple of nice boxes made of hardwood that have sterling silver pieces inside when you open them. Gorgeous accessories and furniture pieces in that room. Yeah. So that's the Colden dining room, and that's where everybody's gonna meet. There's also Teresa Welsh, who makes beautiful pottery that's in that room as well. And one other thing to note is that almost every room has little service bells that are hanging. Because in that time, that's how you called the service people to help. So almost every room, it's very easy to miss. There is in every room. I'm almost sure it's in every room. But I love that.
About the artist that made this and how he acquired all of his unique little pieces.
Yes.
How did he acquire all
So
of
he
them?
bought a lot of pieces.
He
Because
supported himself in this art.
he did. I don't know how he did. I think he waited tables, but it was a pretty costly. We do have all the receipts, and at that time, that was sort of the height of miniatures, and miniatures were expensive. And so we do have all records of his purchases, but he bought them. I don't know. But it also took him 10 years, if you think about that. So, you know, I don't know, do the math. He didn't buy it all at once, it took him 10 years. And not everything here is high end. It was the way he put it together. It's the way he put it together that just makes it amazing. But still, even not high-end stuff, it is costly for the wood, costly for the electrical materials, for the 1,500 slate tiles on the roof. So I don't know, that's a good question. But when you're passionate about something, you find the money. So this is the super living room. This is the heart of the house. The name is actually named from the wallpaper that's on the walls that Mark actually copied from an image he liked and made into 3-inch squares. It's crazy. But this is also where Camille Jeannois de May, she's an opera singer, is right now. She has come to the house. She has just performed in the opera. She has now come because she is really in love with Roger Moore. Dun dun dun. So stay with me on that. It's gonna get twisted. And so this room also has some beautiful silver in it. Another beautiful candelabra in silver. We're talking real sterling silver. And that's Camille, and she's after Roger. There's a couple of beautiful pottery pieces in there as well. And then, of course, I think all of the carpets in this house are just beautiful. They're just beautiful. The next room is a tiny music room. So Celestine is supposed to be marrying her, Roderick Moore. But she really is a music major. So she's, I don't know what major. Anyway, so this is the music room where she studies. I'm not sure where Celestine is. We'll find Celestine. But the net is, Celestine really wants to elope with Oscar. So there'll be more about that in a bit. There is a very famous musical instrument maker in miniature named Ken Manning, and a lot of his pieces are in there. I almost want to say this is probably one of the most valuable ones. I don't know. Just in terms of like the number of pieces and the number of really, really good pieces. So another thing to really notice, if you can get in there, is there's a coffered ceiling, beautiful coffered ceiling with over 120 individually laid pieces that make up the ceiling. So if you can get a chance to come and see this up close. Another thing to notice, which goes back to what I was saying about the house being eclectic. There's Christmas paper, Christmas wrapping paper. We use that for wallpaper in some rooms. But it works. It works. It's a little shocking, but it works. So that's Christmas paper that's lining those walls. This might be one of my favorite rooms. It's a Gothic library, and sitting in the Gothic library is old Bostwick. He's the patriarch of the house. He's sitting in the back. He's smoking. He's Celestine's father, and he's kind of like pondering life. He's not so sure he made the right decision about his daughter marrying Roderick. And so he's not happy back there. He's not very comfortable with what's going to happen or what's happening. But this is a beautiful room. One of the reasons why it's favorite is because it's all wood. I love just love woodwork and there's paneled walls and there's a paneled beautiful fireplace and a fireplace screen. One of the things to note, just from a miniature standpoint, there are dozens and dozens of miniature books that are lining the shelves, all readable, all by famous works, Shakespeare. I don't know if I can read them all, but anyway, all in 1/12 scale. And I don't think we even talked about this, but everything we're talking about right now is 1/12 scale, 1 inch to the foot. So all of the books in there most of them were made by Barlow Rehab, a very, very famous miniaturist back in that time. And they might actually have the largest number of Barlow Rehab books. I don't know if anybody's ever judged it against another, but they have a significant number of Barlow Rehab books that I've ever seen in one place. But like I said, all readable. It's hard to see, but there's a full metal medieval soldier. There's a soldier right here, beautiful metal work. And the other lovely piece is this gorgeous globe, which spins if you do that. So that's the Gothic library. Before we head up to the second floor, any questions on the first floor? Yes?
Oh, just in general, how do you know all the stories of the house?
So a lot of it is detailed in the book. There's a book that we put out about Nybylwyck Hall that they sell, I believe, in this shop. But there's also in the room where this was, there were postings about it. So about the family, about the storytelling.
He provided all of that?
He did. There was wonderful documentation. In fact, when Mark, when he unveiled the dollhouse to his friends and his family, he had a wonderful party and he created a little pamphlet that talked about exactly what I'm telling you, the names of each room and the characters.
Oh, I know the choice you had creating it. What was his intent, or what did you do after it was created? Do tours of it?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, he was very ill towards the end of putting this house together. He was almost legally blind. So it wasn't a very happy time, but he did get it finished and he did unveil it, and we lost him not too long after that, in 2000. And then, yeah, so I don't know what his intention was, but I imagine his intention was for many people to see, because that's kind of where his partner came in. I have a feeling that was where the connection came. That's my feeling. I don't know. You don't do this not to show people. Sure, you don't do all of this. So yeah, it really is a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift. There's so many skills that you need to have to be able to do this. One of which is just patience and determination, and that ability to want to finish something. I mean, I would have been, I don't know. Yeah. And to do it without a plan, because I don't think it was a blueprint. I don't think it was a blueprint. So let's head to the second floor. Traditional family bath, very Victorian styling. Again, notice the wallpaper. And there's also a fireplace in there, which that's the other thing I love about this house is almost every room has a fireplace. It's kind of cool. It's kind of from way too, right? And then right next to it is the Godiva sewing room. The reason why it's called the Godiva sewing room is because of the wallpaper. You got it from a Christmas edition of Godiva chocolates. Right out of the box. I love it. So the dress that Celestine is going to be wearing is featured in this room. And I think Mark really captured a lot of the great details, including if you really, really look closely, there's a tiny spot of red blood that's on the middle of the silver dress. A little bit of foreshadowing of what's to come, or what's drama is to come. But the wedding dress is being made in progress. It is being progress. And then next over is the gold bed chamber. That's Celestine's bedroom. A couple of beautiful pieces in there. There's the gorgeous hand-painted wardrobe. Gorgeous hardwood floors. I don't think we really spend enough time talking about the flooring. The flooring in here is beautiful. We get to the teal color there, but the flooring is beautiful. There's a Claire Bell chandelier Claire Bell was very popular in the early 2000s for solid brass fixtures, accessories. That is the upstairs maid there, and Lisa Celestine's dress that she's going to wear for her honeymoon. Like I said, whole service. Also, the carpet area was really great. Next up is the blue and marble bed chamber. This is the master bedroom. That is Eugene DeBerry, who's Boswick's wife, current wife. She is preparing Celestine's trousseau. She's about to get married. She's going to go on a honeymoon. There's crocodile luggage there. Wonderful, wonderful accessories and shoes. Gorgeous hand-painted pottery. I love the color of that room and the floor. Oh, it's just perfect. It's perfect. A lot of the paintings you see in the rooms are all they're hand-framed reprints, if you will. There's not a lot of hand-painted pieces in them. There's probably none that I see, but most of them are reprints. So you save money here. You know, if you think about it. But I love the luggage and I love all of the accessories. This is the Scheherazade sitting room. There is a little girl, one of the Nybylwyck family children are reading Arabian Nights, which is perfectly timed to that period. There's a marbleized faux fireplace, and like I said, every room has a fireplace. You know, like I said, all this LED lighting really helps bring the house to life. We have to a place we haven't seen in a long time because a lot of the lighting wasn't really working. But with that, you get to see so much more. And every time you look, I'm noticing that beautiful thing did. I don't know if it's secretary. And I've never seen. I mean, I've been visiting this house for 10 years, and I've never seen it that lit up with beautiful. And I'm noticing that it's carved. It's not only painted, but it's carved and painted. Yeah. And then you have the baby's nursery. That's Nana Clinfoyle. She's the main nanny who takes care of the Nybylwyck children. And there are a number of beautiful artisan fine art miniature toys in this room, made by artists at the time. But some are around today, but dolls. There's also a dollhouse that's made for a dollhouse. Yeah, beautiful. And then, like I said, just toys, and there are more books back there. It's kind of crazy. So that's the second floor. Any questions before we move on to the third floor? Okay, so this is Mona. Did I not mention Mona? There he is. I missed Mona. He's the butler. So you get the number 1 and 2 helpers. Mona, number 1. And that's his room. Is that a cool room? All right. So that's Monarch's bedroom, and then next door you have the washing room. And again, back to that detail. You can see the slab walls are not finished, which would be typical for a house at that time. You wouldn't finish the walls of the washroom, so you can see the slabs. You can see all of the plaster coming through. Love. Yeah. And then, so that's the one room, there's another maid's room, and then this is the Egypto-Tudor room. One of the things about miniatures is you have so many places to go with miniatures in the sense that, you can start collecting modern miniatures, you can start collecting Egyptian-themed miniatures. And this kind of, to me, reflects Mark's interest in a specific category of miniatures, and then building his room around it. That's kind of how I see it. But here it is, this beautiful Egypto-Tudor room, which is just filled with all these magical, period, accurate things that represent that sort of genre. So that's the Egypto-Tudor room. Wow, I'm sorry. I never saw back there. Oh my God, you just can't. The ceiling is amazing. You have to see the ceiling. What it looks like what he did was he used Egyptian paper like hieroglyphs and embellished the coffered ceiling. That's crazy. Never saw that. This is great. This is the boys' Biedermeier blue and gray bedchamber. So these are the boys of Van Nybylwyck family. They're in for the wedding celebration, and one of the key things to note in this room is this pull-down ladder that goes up to this spooky room. So back to sort of the fairies and the Victorian era occult. And you know, in the story of the Nybylwyck family, they hear all the thumps in the middle of the night. They get it. And next to that is the rooftop conservatory, because every large house needs 2 conservatories. I'm just saying. So this is more of like the pretty conservatory. So you get a lot of plants and flowers, and then you have this lovely little pottery shed. I mean, just who thinks of that? I just love that, and I love the tile floor. Yeah. So there's pottery, and then there's the ready green room, and this is kind of like, you know, Mark got tired of buying stuff because this is all like really the store-bought stuff, and he left it for the maid because it's the governess bedchamber, which is lovely in and of itself. It's just not as elaborate as anything else here. And this actually is a really good example of how all the rooms work together. So if you look back there, there's a circular staircase. You can't see it on the second floor, but you can see it on the first floor. It's crazy. Crazy. It even goes all the way up to that room, which, I'll talk about the top floor, because this is Glencora's suite. That is Glencora. She is the sort of the matriarch of the family. And she's in her wedding dress, because she was jilted at the altar. She remains in her wedding dress, and she's kind of like a ghost, but she's still living. Does that make sense? She's the grandmother of the couple, so she's reclusive. She has that whole wing up there, and she's not happy. She's waiting for her fiance to return. And it's actually a lot higher than before, right on here. Because if you look really closely, you can see she's got dentures that are on the floor. She's a lot of mess. But I love those details. She's very Miss Havisham looking. And next to that is the artist studios. Is one of the Van Nybylwyck family boys, likes to think of himself as an artist. Again, I think all of these rooms play into Mark's ideologies of who Mark is. He was very artistically. So he created this room, and I think that's a representation of himself. And then the next room is the Cathedral of the Lost Souls. That's where really all the activity happens. A lot of ghosts going on in there. There's one that's going through the ceiling. He's making his way out, get out of here. And what I love about that goes back to just Mark's innovation or creativity. He's holding up like a plastic cocktail stick. I just love that. Of course it's a cocktail stick, but it's made of plastic. So ghosts and fairies very much a part of the Van Nybylwyck family. And then there's the wretched garret, which is kind of one of, it is the last room, but it's also not finished, which makes sense. It's kind of the last room. It's not really finished yet. It's still being painted and worked on. Apparently this is where Tosca, the music teacher, hangs out most of the time. But like I said, lots of drama happening in this house. Lots of drama around Celestine and the opera singer loving this guy, she's loving that guy. We don't really know how the story ends. I think at the end of the day, it's really up to you to figure that out. What happens after, what happens? It's all happening right now. It's starting to happen right now, but we don't really know the conclusion. And I think Mark's done a really, really good job giving us the tools giving us the foundation for just taking his beautiful home and just thinking more about it and about the characters that are in there and inspiring us to this day. So that is Nybylwyck. Yes, ma'am. I don't think so. I mean, I think, like I said, the building process is extensive. You would have had to know. I mean, some things he could have added on last minute, conservatory. But I think, for the most part, he would have had to know how many rooms he wanted to do before he started. He probably would have wanted to know how many floors he was doing before he started. I think he would have had to know a lot more. Could have been off the cuff for sure. Would have been very difficult, especially with wiring. That's another really extensive part of miniature. Oh, the decorating part. Again, I think, especially if you have a very clear vision, like I think you did, that takes time, and not everything is available at the same time. Like I said, this took him 10 years, so he might have been thinking a lot of the time, and he did commission a lot of work. He worked with the Washington Toy Miniature shop to commission artists to make the dolls for him, to make some of the furniture for him. So what he couldn't buy off the rack, he didn't have made for himself. That takes time. That takes time. So there are a lot of letters that he was writing back and forth to either the artist or the shop owner, saying things like, I want a doll with a dress, or things like that. But because it takes so much time, it couldn't be. It takes time. That's it. Yeah.
Are there any pictures, like, from the process, like, of how he goes?
I don't think so. Not that I have seen.
Do you think there are items that he changed completely, like he started, or no? I don't.
Not that I know of. Not that I have seen in any of the records that I have gone through. But I would imagine over a 10-year period, he changed his mind.
Yeah.
I would think so. Yeah. And that's also just part of the creative process.
Yeah.
But some things I think he would have had to structure, like the number of floors and things like that. Because this, I think the house comes apart in like 3 major pieces. So he would have to build those 3 major pieces kind of at the same time, or knowing what he was doing. But I haven't seen any pictures in progress. But think about it, in the 90s. We didn't have like smartphones.
It's
We would, I would.
It's like,
Yeah, you would have to develop it. And there aren't even that many pictures of him. I mean, this is a picture of him. There are some other photos of him, but I haven't seen too many photos of him. But yes.
To disassemble this and move it over here and put everything back in its place, how is that managed?
I have to give it to them, the staff here, because when I learned that they were moving in, I just started to hold my breath. But they did a magnificent job. They took everything out. They put everything back in, but they did it. And they made it a lot. It's just bravo. Because
How much work is it?
I don't know, but it's probably very I would think it's like some now. So those are actual miniature slate tiles, and there are 1,500 of them. Those alone probably add. Yeah.
Based on the miniature. How does this compare to other works?
Well, like I said, there are dollhouses, and then there are fine art pieces. There are very few of these in the world. Very few. Because it's such an undertaking. The general collector who might have a beautiful 20-room dollhouse, it's not going to be a creative endeavor. It's going to be more of a fine art endeavor. It's going to be more of a finding beautiful things in the structure. This was much more than that. And not to say that beautiful 20-room kitchen house is not beautiful. I love it. It's just not this. It's different. Does that make sense? But this does not exist over here. You would find iterations of it, but it wouldn't be this. It wouldn't be that thing, that one thing that, yes, like, yeah, this belongs to just the fact that it's Godiva wallpaper. Godiva paper. Most of us would poo-poo that off so quickly, but not in this composition. Because this really is a composition. This has to be seen in its entirety for it to be as special as it is. I mean, I would say the rooms are nice. If I broke apart each room, I'd be like, okay, that's a beautiful room in and of itself. Like the kitchen is gorgeous, but it's the value is in all of this picture, and then they have the storytelling and have it. Yeah. Any other questions about Nybylwyck Hall? I do really encourage you. Yes.
I used to live in a very old house in 1910. I can identify with this house because the whole concept of the family changed. Like, we didn't have a family. So that's something that changed about it. Also, there was no family. Because that was all right, that's, you know, so the whole
Yeah, I think he had that nailed in the family unit, living in this large house, all of the servants working. Yeah, no, I agree. He got that, he captured really well, that snapshot in time. Especially with the fairies, that's one of my favorite parts of it. All the fairies and the ghosts. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes. So there are three distinct architectural inspirations for this. And so this is the Dutch, this is the Georgian, and this is the Federal. But it's much more evident when you see the front. Because the architecture of the front, like the cone roof, is much more reflective. The Federal style is very kind of flat. You'll see it on the front. It's not really, oh, that's very good, may I? So here you go. So you got the Dutch, you got the Federal, and then the Georgian. This is the Dutch. I'm sorry, this is the Dutch. This is the Federal. This is the Victorian. And the Dutch, you can see, is the beautiful, the brickwork. Look at the brickwork. How it's rounded edges. Then this is your Federal, very kind of clean lines, and then the Victorian with the beautiful mansard roof, copper. Any other questions? So I do encourage you to actually walk around and see things that might have been better. But thank you very much.